Unfortunately, the United Kingdom is experiencing problem after problem that might cause slight concern to the economy. Just like my toilet after a night out, the UK economy is in some shit right now. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, chaps. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about the heavy debt burden plaguing the United Kingdom and what steps we need to take to solve it. To go straight to the figures, the UK officially reached a debt to GDP ratio of 100% at the end of August, the highest level since the early 1960s when we were paying off war debts. Our indebtedness has been on the rise since the global financial crisis of 2008, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down anytime soon. One thing to add to this is that this figure is very much an underestimate of public debt, since it doesn't take into account future liabilities of an aging population. If you include the cost of public sector pensions, this figure rises to 150%. The Office for Budget Responsibility has forecast that the UK public debt will reach a staggering 274% of GDP in 2074. That being said, economists do have a hard time predicting 5 years into the future, let alone 50. But this is still food for thought. So why are we so indebted? The simple answer is that the last 2 decades have not been an easy ride for the economy, with a global financial crisis, pandemic, and energy crisis. For basically the whole time of being alive, there's been some ongoing problems. Believe it or not, tax revenues aren't that high when half the population is either unemployed, plagued with illness, or cannot afford their own mortgage. Couple that with increased welfare spending during each crisis, and you end up with a heavy debt burden. Furthermore, there is an almost endless appetite from financial markets for government debt, and until recently, interest rates were historically very low. When it comes to fighting debt, a country has 2 options: painless reduction through economic growth, or a more painful trudge through austerity. I know. The word austerity is like the he who shall not be named from Harry Potter. To put it simply, austerity is shit, because you're essentially weakening your own economy by raising taxes and reducing government spending. That's why the best way to reduce public debt is through growth, and it's why the recent Labour government has put such an emphasis on it.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
If you measure public debt in proportion to GDP, that proportion will obviously shrink when GDP rises. But an increase in growth leads to higher tax revenues for the government, lower welfare spending, and also more favourable rates for newly issued bonds. Back in the 40s and 50s, the government successfully paid off a lot of war debts through high growth, artificially low, in fact negative, real interest rates, and also a tool called financial repression, where the government imposed capital controls and fixed exchange rates. However, growth is hard to achieve. It's kind of like when you promise your friends you're only having 2 beers tonight. It's easy to promise beforehand. Whether it actually happens is a different story. How and whether the UK government will achieve higher growth is a whole other video in and of itself. I say that quite a lot. Later this month, we'll have our annual October budget, which I will be making a video on, which prompts me to say that you should subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that. Luckily, the ground is set for a good year of growth ahead of us. Inflation is under control, labour markets are all swell, and we have seemed to narrowly dodge the recession we were supposed to have. Saying this, of course, could age like milk. I'm excited to see whether this problem gets addressed in the budget later this month. After all, public debt is a low priority amongst voters in most Western countries. I'm optimistic that we will experience good growth this coming year, not because of any particular government, but because of our macroeconomic conditions. Thank you for watching this far into the video. Cheerio.